Hello everyone! In this video, I'll be showing you how to sew and attach the collars, as seen on the back zipping TNG jumpsuits. These collars were seen on many different uniforms across multiple uniform eras. They were made, interfaced, and attached different ways on the different uniform styles. Like I said, in this video, we'll be focusing on the back zipping TNG jumpsuits. I'll be doing separate video tutorials for the collars on other uniform styles. Sewing patterns for most of the uniforms I just mentioned are available on my Tailors Gone Wild website, www.tailorsgonewild.com. Patterns for the others are coming as soon as I can get them to you. I'll be demonstrating with my TNG jumpsuit sewing pattern. Custom dyed collar piping is also available on the Tailors Gone Wild website. I color matched it to screen-used costumes and elements, and it works great for both the jumpsuits and the wool jackets. So let's dive in. In this case, the collar is comprised of 3 layers: the collar shell, piece A1, the collar lining, also piece A1, and the division-colored collar piping. Apply a mid-weight or heavyweight fusible interfacing to the underside of your collar. Cut a length of collar piping several inches longer than the collar itself. Pin the collar piping into place along the upper edge of the collar, extending slightly beyond the back edge and at least a couple inches past the lower front. Note that the upper edge of the collar has 3/8 inch seam allowance, but the piping lip is only a 1/4 inch, so the piping will need to be inset a bit so the edge of the cord is exactly along the seam line. Using a zipper/piping foot, sew the piping to the upper edge of the collar with 3/8 inch seam allowance. Trim away the excess piping length at the back edge and carefully apply some liquid fray preventer. On the collar lining, press the 3/8 inch lower neckline allowances upward. Pin the collar lining to the collar along the upper edges, right sides together. Again, using a zipper/piping foot, sew the collar lining to the collar along the upper edge with 3/8 inch seam allowance. Start and stop your stitching 1 inch from the back of the collar. Notch the seam allowances along the front curve, and clip the allowances along the rest of the upper seam. Turn the collar lining under and press. Repeat for the other side of the collar. Pin both collar assemblies to the jumpsuit neckline with the edges of the piping flush at the center front. Baste across the center front and check to make sure the edges of the piping are flush at the seam line. Then baste the rest of the collar to the jumpsuit neckline with 3/8 inch seam allowance. Check to make sure the collar is properly basted, with no pleats, tucks, puckers, etc. If everything is good to go, sew the collar to the jumpsuit. I suggest reinforcing your stitching several times across the center front. I also suggest anchoring the 2 lengths of piping together beneath the seam with a bar tack or slightly longer zigzag stitch. Clip the neckline/collar seam allowances to the stitching about 1 inch from each side of the center front. At the center front, press the seam allowances downward toward the yoke and press the allowances upward into the collar around the rest of the neckline. Then trim the collar piping excess down to a couple inches or so and apply some liquid fray preventer to the new ends. Cut a small 1.5 inch square of lightweight fabric. Anything lightweight and black will do. I just used a scrap of cheap black cotton. Press under 1/4 inch along each edge. Fold the fabric square in half and slip it over the ends of the piping, enclosing them. Edge stitch the protective square, now a rectangle, into place over the piping. Skipping ahead to the end of the construction process, tack the back collar allowances under by hand, taking care to only stitch through the seam allowances and fusible interfacing so your stitches won't be visible on the outside of the jumpsuit. Hand sew the lower folded edge of the collar lining to the jumpsuit neckline, just inside the machine stitching. Hand sew 3 hook and eye closures to the back of the collar, above the zipper. There's a free sewing tutorial for the TNG jumpsuits on my blog, www.StarTrekCostumeGuide.com. Like I mentioned earlier, sewing patterns for them are available at www.tailorsgonewild.com, both as physical copies and digital downloads. I've also put together an entire video walkthrough on how to make the TNG jumpsuits, which you can also get on the Tailors Gone Wild website. I don't know about you, but I'm a monkey see, monkey do kind of learner. The free tutorial on my blog is very thorough, with detailed instructions and dozens of photos, but I definitely learn best when somebody says, sew these 2 pieces together along this seam, and I get to actually watch them do it, so I know exactly how to do it too. The full walkthrough is over an hour and a half long, and we cover literally every step of the entire process. Sew this, press these seams, line this thing up with this thing, and before you know it, you have a finished uniform. So check that out if you're interested, and I'll catch you in the next video.